Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a time of drafty stone walls, smoldering hearths, and armored stomachs, not exactly the five-star dining experience. But hey, you're a medieval knight. Specifically, we're slipping into your boots. Morning before battle, you're groggy. You smell like smoke, leather, and yesterday's sweat. And the food? Well, let's just say you probably won't survive this meal, let alone the battlefield. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Know in the comments where are you watching from, and what time is it right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyelids peel open, sticky with the chill. The fire has long gone out, leaving only a faint orange glow in the hearth. In a room that smells like damp wool and old iron, you're curled up on a straw mattress stuffed with something that might once have been hay. Your boots sit by the wall, stiff from yesterday's march, still carrying the scent of wet earth and horse sweat. The window is just a slit and the stone-cold air slices through it like a blade. At the well, that means the servants are up, which means it's time to drag yourself upright and face the truly medieval horror awaiting you. Breakfast, you shuffle down the narrow stone stairs, your cloak dragging behind you like a defeated flag. The hall is dim, lit only by a few tallow candles and the weak gray light of dawn. At the long wooden table, your meal awaits. And oh, what a meal! A wooden bowl of something vaguely beige stares back at you. It's porridge. Thick, sticky, and studded with what might be dried onions, or possibly mouse droppings. You prod it with your spoon. It jiggles. Next to it sits a hunk of yesterday's breadstone, hard and darker than your sense of humor. You try not to break a tooth as you gnaw it, like an anxious dog.
Always.
The crust tastes of ash and time.
I'm not.
But hey, it's full of fiber. Maybe you. Down a sip of small ale alcohol beer brewed because water is basically a death sentence. It's flat, warm, and slightly sour, like a bad decision in mug form. But it's safer than the well, and it might even wake you up, or put you back to sleep. Hard to say. A squire passes by carrying a bucket of what appears to be turnip stew, sloshing it dangerously close to your boots. He's barely older than 14 and looks like he hasn't slept in a week. For the dogs, he mumbles. You. Blink. You had stew for dinner last night. Welcome to the noble life. Outside the manor, the world groans awake. Chickens squawk half-heartedly. Somewhere, a horse snorts like it's judging your life choices. You wrap your cloak tighter and step outside, breath fogging the air like a ghost escaping your lungs. The air smells of manure and mist, classic rural ambience. You walk toward the training yard past a wooden post spattered with dried blood. From yesterday's practice, some poor knight got too enthusiastic or too clumsy. You nod to the blacksmith who's already hammering something into submission, probably a horseshoe, possibly his own frustration. Breakfast is technically over, but your stomach isn't convinced it even happened. You reach into your pouch and find a wrinkled apple. You bite into it. It's mealy, vaguely sour, and has the texture of a wool sock. But it's fruit, sort of, rich in vitamin, something maybe. Historians still argue whether most knights regularly ate fruit at all, or if that was more of a lordly luxury. But no one argues that breakfast was ever a lavish affair, not when there were horses to feed, swords to polish, and possibly a war to march toward by noon. Back in the hall, the hearth's been rekindled. A new pot hangs above the flame, something gray, bubbling inside. You hope it's soup. You strongly suspect it's not. A servant sprinkles in a handful of herbs, probably to hide the smell. Probably failing. You sip more ale. It's already gone tepid. You think about lunch. You try not to cry. The funny thing is, you're lucky. Really? A proper night like you? You've got food? Maybe not food that tastes like anything pleasant, but it's calories. Most peasants survive on gruel and dreams. You, on the other hand, get slightly fancier gruel in mild gastrointestinal distress. You chuckle softly, or maybe you burp. Not to tell. Then the bell rings. One of the squires jogs through the yard, panting. Orders from the captain. Muster at the east gate in 1 hour. You groan, rubbing your belly like it's a sacred relic. 1 hour to digest whatever crimes against cuisine you just swallowed. 1 hour before armor, before horses, before shouting. Before blood, you look at the bowl again. Still half full. Still. Yeah. Jiggling. Still judging you. But you sigh and take one last spoonful. Because deep down you know the truth. You need every scrap of strength you can get. A body you're wearing into. Battle is built on bad bread and onion porridge. And somehow it'll have to be enough. You swing your leg over the low wooden bench, bones creaking almost as much as the floorboards beneath you. The rest of the knights are gathering now, hunched over their bowls, quietly chewing, faces slack with sleep. The room smells like stale air and warm grain, which, in fairness, is preferable to how the latrine smells this time of morning. One of the men tries to light a pipe and is quickly told to knock it off before the Lord wakes and smells it. Tobacco? Not quite. Dried cabbage and mint leaves. It smells like betrayal and compost. You glance back down at your meal. The porridges. Consistency hasn't improved with time. In fact, it's begun to form a kind of skin, like it's trying to shield itself from being eaten. You give it a stir with the handle of your knife. It sighs softly, or maybe that's just your imagination. Either way, you press on. A night without breakfast is just a very angry man in armor. There's a chunk of something floating in the mush. You think it might be turnip? You pray it's not cartilage. The small ale beside you is flat, brownish and served at what medieval cooks like to call tepid misery. You drink it anyway. It's better than the water from the nearby stream, which last week had a sheep. Float into it upside down, you remember. Help push it out. And no, nobody boiled the water afterward. This is why everyone drinks beer, even toddlers. Historians still argue whether small ale had enough alcohol to kill anything dangerous, but it's agreed that psychologically, it helped you catch a whiff of something sweeter. You turn. It's one of the Lord's favorites, a man whose armor is too clean for someone who claims to fight, is munching on a fresh honey roll. A honey roll. You'd trade your left boot for a taste. Maybe your squire too. That roll likely came from the Lord's private kitchen, where the cooks have access to real spice, flour that hasn't been peed on by rats, and sugar that didn't come in a lumpy gray brick. The hierarchy is obvious, even at the breakfast table. You're scraping the crust of a loaf that tastes faintly of chimney. He's got sticky fingers and not a care in the world. You try not to glare. The difference in food. Quality wasn't just based on wealth, it was logistical. Kitchens couldn't just conjure meals. It depended on what was available, preserved or still walking. You might eat mutton one day and dried peas the next. Most of the time your diet was made up of pottage, a stew of whatever was, lying around grains, vegetables, bits of meat, and occasionally an accidental beetle or two. You once found a frog leg in your pottage. You told no one. It was the most protein you'd had all week. Today's breakfast is a little heavier than usual. You know why? The squires know why. The cook definitely knows why. Words already spreading through the camp. Movement expected. Before midday, there's always a shift in the meal before battle. A bit more fat, a chunk of meat, if you're lucky, thicker stew, something to anchor you. Because the next time your mouth opens, it might be to scream, not eat. Across the hall, someone's gnawing on a cold sausage. The skin is taut and squeaky. You feel a flicker of envy. The knights from the southern border always get sausages. Something about pigs being easier to keep there. You once tried trading your belt buckle for one. The answer was a firm no. In the end, your squire made you one out of beans lard and crushed garlic. It exploded halfway through cooking and nearly burned his eyebrows off. He still blames you. Lean back slightly, letting the bench creak in protest. Your armor's hanging nearby, oil slicked, heavy, waiting like an impatient mule. You'll need to finish eating soon and start layering up. But not yet. There's still ale in your mug, and your joints aren't warmed up enough to face all that iron. You take another spoonful. It's lukewarm now. Less food and more culinary suggestion. But it's doing its job. Slow release energy. You tell yourself that's what oats are. The knight beside you burps softly. It smells like he had onions for dinner, and onions again for breakfast, and probably will again for lunch. The entire room could probably double as a large chainmail wearing. Onion patch. You grab a small wedge of cheese from your pack. It's hard, dry, and vaguely orange. The outside is suspiciously shiny. You scratch it with your knife, not wax, mold. You cut that part off and eat the rest anyway. Calcium, sort of cheese, was common in your diet, not the rich kind nobles melted on bread, but the kind that cracked when you bit it and sometimes squeaked when chewed. It stored well, traveled decently, and if it didn't taste like death, it probably wasn't authentic. You shift your gaze out the small, iron-barred window. The sky is finally lightening. Mist curls along the ground, and in the distance, you hear a rooster giving up on life. Few figures cross the courtyard's choirs carrying armor. Grooms leading horses, someone dragging a barrel that sloshes. Your gut is settling. It's hard to tell if that's digestion or dread. You always get this feeling before marching, like the food knows what's coming and is trying to prepare by clenching itself into a brick. You pack away the cheese and whatever's left of the bread. The porridge bowl you leave behind, solidified into something resembling medieval cement. Someone will probably use it to patch a crack in the wall. You belch, softly, respectfully. Then you rise. Time to put on the steel. But hey, at least you're not doing it on an empty stomach. The hall is clearing now, boots scuffing against flagstones as men file out into the morning air. The clink of metal is growing louder. Greaves, gauntlets, swords being strapped on with the kind of sleepy resignation that comes only from repetition and quiet dread. You stand, brush a few crumbs from your tunic, and glance over your shoulder. The servants are already gathering up the bowls. One of them gives yours a brief sniff, recoils, and dumps the contents straight into a slop bucket. You don't blame him? Out in the courtyard, your squire is struggling with your breastplate, still damp from the last rain and smells like wet pennies. He grunts a greeting, then starts the familiar dance of layering on the weight of your status. First the padded gambeson, quilted thick like a badly stuffed pillow. Then chainmail, links clinking together like a nest of metallic worms. Then the armor plates. It's like becoming a one-man dinner bell. As he works, you steal a glance at the other knights lining up nearby. You count 8 so far, most still. Yawning, stretching, one trying in vain to scratch under his mail shirt. You notice the variations in their gear and in their breakfasts. One of the older knights is eating a dried pear, slow and deliberate, like he's savoring the moment. Another has a thick slice of rye bread topped with lard and a smear of horseradish. It smells aggressive. You silently thank the gods you didn't sit near him earlier. Food, like everything else in this world, is dictated by rank. And even among knights, rank is everything. You're not a landholding baron, you're a banneret, sworn to another man's household, which means your meals are portioned out based on politics as much as pantry stock. Higher-ranked knights get richer cuts, more variety, and, occasionally, spices actual spices. You've seen cinnamon once, smelled nutmeg, dreamed of pepper. Meanwhile, your standard fare is a crust of bread that doubles as a weapon if left out too long and cheese so sharp it could pass for a dagger. The disparity is especially clear during feast days. The great hall hosts long wooden tables lined with trenchers, those thick slabs of stale bread used as plates by the poor and dogs alike. You know your place. You're just far enough up. The chain to sit at a table, but not high enough to avoid chewing on something that might chip a tooth. A moment of stillness hits as you sit on a low wall, adjusting your gauntlets. The cook passes by with a basket, half covered with cloth. You catch a glimpse of what's inside, warm meat pastries. You smell thyme, maybe rosemary. He pauses near the captain and offers one. The captain takes it without looking. You suppress a sigh. You haven't seen fresh meat all week, unless you count the mystery smear in your turnip stew. Historians still argue whether food distribution in knightly households was rigid, or adaptable depending on campaign needs. But one thing's clear. The closer your bed is to the Lord's chamber, the better your odds of getting breakfast that isn't beige. The sun's finally broken past the treetops, sending golden light across the camp and illuminating your companions' faces. You can see which ones had a second helping and which ones are already regretting last night's salted eel. Salted eel? That wasn't a metaphor. That was real. You remember it vividly? The eel wasn't dead. It blinked. You shift in your armor, feeling the gambeson bunching awkwardly under your arms. Your squire steps back, satisfied, and hands you a half-stale biscuit for the road. You crunch down. Tastes like sand, regret, and possibly clove. You wash it down with the last of your ale and wipe your mouth on your sleeve. Oh, nobles use napkins. Knights use sleeves. The cook's boy runs past again, this time carrying a small tray with a single roasted quail. It's for the lord's hunting master, apparently. You briefly consider tripping him. Just a stumble. A fumbled tray. A fallen bird. A chance. But no, it's not nightly. Probably your horse is waiting, tall, broad, and disinterested. He smells of oats and damp wool. You pat his neck and glance at his feed bag. It's full of grain barley, mostly, with maybe a handful of beans. Honestly, his breakfast looks better than yours. It probably tastes better, too. You swing into the saddle. It groans. You groan. Everyone groans. Someone behind you farts. You pray it wasn't you. The column begins to form, riders falling into line. Spears resting across shoulders, pennants fluttering in the rising breeze. It's the quiet before the noise. It's the long exhale before the plunge. You bite the inside of your cheek, thinking about the bread you didn't finish. Your stomach churns softly like it's whispering, "You know what we could have used? Second helping." Too late now. Shift again, trying to find a position that doesn't crush your lunch into your spleen. You glance at the knight riding beside you. He's chewing something thoughtfully. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs and offers you a strip of dried meat. It looks suspect. You take it anyway. It's chewy, salty, and tastes vaguely of smoke and hoof, but it's protein. And at this point, it's like currency. As the gates open and the sound of hooves clattering against stone begins to echo through the valley, you adjust your helmet, grip your reins, and take one last bite of jerky. It's not glamorous. It's not generous. But it'll have to be enough. The road out of the manor snakes through frost-kissed fields and sleepy villages where chimneys puff trails of white smoke into the brittle sky. Your horse's hooves click against the frozen dirt, and behind you the line of riders stretches. Like a ribbon of iron and wool. Somewhere up ahead a crow cackles. You adjust your cloak and try not to think about your bladder. Your stomach gurgles instead, as if protesting the concept of movement after mystery porridge. You pat it. "Steady on," you murmur under your breath, earning a curious glance from the knight behind you. He's busy chewing something. Probably a turnip he brought in his saddlebag, possibly raw. You reach for your own supplies, tucked into a pouch beside your thigh. Inside, you find the traveler's holy trinity: hard cheese, dried meat, and a slightly bruised apple. Also, one pickle, wax-wrapped. The smell hits you like a slap of vinegar and hope. You consider saving it for later, then remember, there might not be a later. So you eat it now? Crunchy, sharp, perfect. This is the life of a night on the road. No taverns. It's just what you can carry, and what your cook packed before sunrise. You're lucky today. Kitchen staff managed to send out a supply cart, rattling behind you with wheels that sound increasingly less round. On that cart, salt pork, dried peas, smoked fish, and a barrel of sour ale already leaking at the seams. You pass a trail marker carved into stone, moss-covered and crooked. 10 miles to the staging field. That's 2 hours if the horses hold, or 4 if someone forgets how stirrups work again. You remember last time? Sir Humbert fell off his horse because he tied his boots together by accident. He blamed the squire. The squire blamed Mead. No one blamed the boots. Food on the move is tricky. There are no coolers, no Ziploc bags, no microwaves. Salt, smoke, and a prayer to St. Lawrence patron saint of cooking, who, legend says, was grilled alive and had the gall to tell his executioners, "Turn me over. I'm done on this side." You have no plans to be that brave or that crispy. You reach for the cheese. It's still hard. You press it against your saddle pommel and cut off a slice with your eating knife. The blade's not sharp anymore, but it's seen more bread than blood, which feels like a win. The cheese has a familiar tang, something between sharp and suspicious. a good sign. The mold has stopped growing, possibly because it has no more territory to conquer. You toss a piece to your squire, riding just behind you on a shaggy mule that looks perpetually offended by existence. He catches it in one gloved hand, bites down, and gives you a thumbs up. He's young, eager, and convinced this campaign will bring him glory. You, however, are more focused on whether the smoked sausage in your pouch is still edible or alive. The sun is inching upward now, bright enough to sting your eyes when it breaks through the trees. A few knights remove their helmets. Steam rises from their scalps. You smell sweat, horse leather, and unexpectedly garlic. You turn toward the source. Sir Aldrich, who hails from a southern province, is happily chomping on something wrapped in cloth. He notices your glance, grins, and offers a bite. You accept, mostly out of curiosity. It's a stuffed rolled barley bread filled with ground meat. And garlic, he claims it's rabbit. You suspect it's something that once looked at him funny, but it's warm, spiced, and it doesn't bite back, so you smile in return. Culinary diplomacy at its finest. You pass a thicket of trees, and just beyond them you see smoke rising, a small campfire. A support unit has stopped to rest and eat. They're gathered around a brazier, one of those metal contraptions that tries desperately to cook without burning your eyebrows off. A pot hangs over it, and something is bubbling inside. You steer your horse closer. A wiry man in a soot-stained tunic stirs the pot with a stick, not a ladle, a stick. He nods at you, lifts the lid, gestures for a sniff. Steam wafts up. Onions, leeks barley, maybe bits of beef or something shaped like beef. It actually smells ... decent. You trade a slice of your hard cheese for a scoop of stew. It comes in a small wooden bowl that's been used so often it's polished smooth by time and grime. You cradle it in one hand and sip. It's hot, salty. Comforting in the way a hug from someone who smells like firewood is comforting. You eat every drop. Behind you, one of the younger knights complains about the lack of flavor. You want to laugh? This is flavor. This is what good luck tastes like. You've had meals where the most exciting thing was finding a pebble. Your bread, at least, it gave you something to throw. The cook explains how they keep food edible out here. Salt is king. Vinegar's a minor noble. Smoke is the suspicious uncle who shows up late and overstays his welcome. Between those three methods, can preserve just about anything, from beef to eels to disappointment. Historians still argue whether medieval field kitchens were organized enough to feed entire companies, or if most soldiers and knights just scavenged, bartered, or bribed their way into calories. Based on your current situation, it's definitely a mix of all three. You thank the cook, pass the bowl back, and nudge your horse forward. The road narrows again. You spot a crow perched on a signpost, eyeing your saddlebag like it knows what's inside. You tuck the remaining sausage deeper into the pouch. Not today, feathered thief. Lunch will be in another hour or so, assuming there's time. You're hoping for bread and maybe a fig if the fruit cart didn't overturn. You still remember the time it did. The knights behind it got buried in grapes and didn't even complain. They just laid there, snacking. The horizon dips and you see the first signs of the encampment. Banners flapping, rising like blunt teeth from the ground. Smoke curling from campfires. Soon, you'll dismount. Unstrap. Breathe. Maybe sneak another bite of something before drills begin. For now, you'll lean forward, pat your horse's neck, and pop the last of the apple into your mouth. It's soft, slightly bruised and tastes faintly of victory, or at least survival. And for a night, that's all breakfast really needs to be. The camp unfolds before you like an untidy quilt patches of canvas tents. Smoke curling from hastily dug fire pits, and men moving like ants with armor. Your horse picks its way around a barrel someone forgot to roll off the path, and a dog know. One knows who trots alongside, licking something suspicious off its paw. Probably gravy. Hopefully gravy. You dismount with a grunt and hand the reins to a stable hand, who looks about 12 and already tired of war. Your squire follows close behind, cheeks flushed, gripping both your saddlebag and his dreams of knighthood. Around the camp, the smell of cooking competes with the aroma of unwashed bodies and smoldering dung. You're suddenly struck by how Everything in this world seems to involve fire, smoke, or onions, especially onions. But as you pass the main mess tent, your nose catches something unexpected. Fish. You wrinkle your brow. It's a Friday. Of course, you'd nearly forgotten. The church calendar, ever watchful, does not bend even for war. It is a fast day, no meat. Not even the flaky dried pork your squire tried to sneak into your midday meal. Got swatted for it. By the cook with a ladle. No meat means fish or legumes. Or whatever else can be passed off as humble in the eyes of God and in the bowels of a knight. You step into the canvas mess tent, ducking low to avoid the sagging flap. Inside, long benches creak under the weight of squires and menadderms, each holding bowls of something gray. You recognize the smell immediately, lentil stew. Again, always lentils, a monk probably. Attached to the chaplain's service wanders the rose, blessing bowls. You nod as he passes. He blesses yours twice. Either he likes you, or the stew needs divine assistance. You sit, your armor groaning with protest. The squire deposits your bowl in front of you with a hopeful look, as if he expects gratitude. You hand him a crust of bread from your pouch instead. Fair trade. The lentils stare up at you, unblinking, bland, and somehow smug. You take a spoonful. Tastes like resignation and overboiled humility. Somewhere in there is a hint of leek. Maybe. Across the table, a knight tries to liven up his stew with dried herbs pulled from a cloth pouch. The effort is noble. The outcome is ... green. Historians still argue whether fast days were strictly followed by knights in active campaigns, especially on the march or in hostile territory. Some say the church made allowances. Others claim enforcement was fierce. You suspect the answer lies, as usual, somewhere between faith and flatulence. You remember once being served fish.
Oh.
On a fast day that tasted suspiciously like salted beef, the cook insisted it came from a river. You're still not sure what kind of river spawns brisket. Someone nearby has managed to snag a piece of fried herring. The scent cuts through the stew fog like a blade. Your stomach perks up. You scan the tent and spot the source. The quartermaster's assistant with a plate he's absolutely not supposed to have. One glance at his smug chewing and you know it's stolen. You admire him silently, would have done the same. Instead, you return to your lentils. They're cooling now, thickening into a texture best described as woolly paste. You tear a piece of your bread and use it like a spoon. The bread is dense, heavy, and cracked at the edges. But it's warm. Slightly you cradle it like treasure. Fast. Days weren't just about food. Of course, they were about discipline. About controlling earthly pleasures. Which makes sense until you remember that most people's earthly pleasures amounted to eating something not terrible. Still, you chew dutifully, because you're a knight. And because you saw what happened last time, someone snuck beef jerky into a Lenten meal, the chaplain made him confess for an hour, and then assigned him latrine duty. For a week, you look up. To see a small boy barefoot, probably a cook's assistant, wandering the rows with a bucket of pickled beets. He slops one into your bowl without a word. The color bleeds instantly, turning the gray lentils into something that looks like battlefield runoff. You take a bite? It is, at best, tangy. At worst, confusing. Your squire tries to trade his beet for your bread. You pretend not to see him. A knight at the end of the bench jokes that he's planning to offer the beet to his horse. Everyone chuckles. Nervously, horses are treated well. If the horse eats it and dies, that's a war crime. You eat it and die. Well, you were probably just weak. The meal ends with a thin broth passed around in a communal pot. It tastes of boiled greens and regret. You swallow it, tell yourself it's good for your health, and then bite down on a bay leaf by accident. It stays in your mouth for far too long. You rise, stretch, and exit the tent just as the bell rings. Drills begin soon. The sun's high now, casting a hard glare across the camp. You squint and pull your hood up. Your stomach feels heavy but not satisfied, full but not energized. Lentils do that. They sit in your gut like a melancholy poem. You pass a campfire where a group of archers are sharing roasted chestnuts. Technically, they're not meat. Technically, they're allowed. You edge closer. One of them offers you one. You accept. Warm, soft, sweet. For a moment, you almost forgive the lentils. The afternoon wears on, and drills begin. Sword forms. Horse. Commands, shield drills. Your body complains. Your arms ache. Your back spasms in time with the beat of the drill master's bark. All the while, the stew churns in your belly, conspiring against you. But you press on, because tomorrow may bring a feast or a famine or an arrow, and you'll need every lentil you swallowed today to dodge it. By mid-afternoon, your limbs are warm, your joints have mostly forgiven you, and the camp has taken on that particular scent it always gets right before dusk's smoke, sweat, and something that was definitely once meat. Maybe, possibly, you peel off your gauntlets, flex your fingers, and start thinking dangerously about dinner. It's still a few hours off, but your brain has already begun the slow spiral into culinary desperation. You picture roast duck with cracked pepper, spiced venison on a bed of leeks, warm apple pudding with cream. You've never had apple pudding with cream. You're not even sure it exists, but your mouth waters anyway. The squire appears at your elbow with a familiar grubby cloth bundle. You know that bundle? It contains what can only be described generously as camp snacks. He unwraps it with the flair of a magician revealing a rabbit. Inside, 2 hand pies, 3 dates stuck together with what might be honey, and 1 small, very determined onion. You lift one of the pies and examine it suspiciously. The crust is tough and speckled with ash. The filling, well, who's to say? Could be venison, could be rabbit, could be the world's most adventurous pigeon. You bite in its meat. That's about all you can confirm. Heavily peppered, slightly. Sweet, you chew. Chew again, then decide it's best not to ask questions. At least it's not fish. Mystery pies are the backbone of nightly cuisine. Convenient, portable, and dense enough to stun a man, if thrown hard enough. Sometimes they're meat, sometimes veggie, occasionally eel, if someone lost a bet. Historians still argue whether these were seen as a practical meal or a desperate culinary experiment, but they were everywhere. They usually involved crusts thick enough to serve as structural supports and emergency fortifications. Your squire watches you eat with the solemn pride of a man who didn't bake the pie, but wishes he had. You hand him the smaller one, takes it reverently, like it's a relic. The dates, meanwhile, have fused into a single sticky mass. You break them apart with effort and end up wearing half the honey on your knuckles. You lick it off. It tastes like sunshine and ants. You nod appreciatively. Sugar is rare and precious. These were clearly stolen. It's possibly from the Lord's personal stores. You will say nothing. The onion goes back into the cloth. No one is emotionally ready for that right now. Around you, the camp is humming in that Predner way. Fires being stoked, bread being sliced, someone yelling at a pot for burning again. A dog is barking at a spit roast at something. It could be rabbit. It could also be someone's boot that's just too well seasoned. You wander over to the main fire. Pot is boiling something that smells ... intriguing. You lean closer. Cook glances at you, then tosses in a handful of herbs and shrugs. Bit of this, bit of that, he says, and stirs with a spoon longer than your sword. Mostly cabbage. Ah, the noble cabbage. Night Slayer, morale killer. FLATULENCE-BRINGER. You nod grimly and back away. You end up at a smaller fire with some lower-ranked knights. One of them has a spit set up with skewers of meat that look positively decent. You raise an eyebrow. He grins and waves a skewer at you. Pheasant, I think you accept. Smoky, tender, and surprisingly juicy, which raises a concern. Why is it juicy? What kind of pheasant is this juicy? But you chew anyway. You'll take your chances. Food on campaign is a curious dance of guessing and gratitude. You eat what you're given, try not to ask too many questions, and always trade up when you can. A piece of smoked trout for a boiled egg? A turnip for a scrap of cheese? Once, a particularly nice apple got you 3 strips of salted boar and a story about a haunted privy. If you never looked at outhouses the same since. The sun is dipping lower now. Shadows stretch long across the camp. The men are settling in. Some sharpening swords. Some writing letters they'll never finish. Some arguing over which saint protects you from indigestion. Answer no one. Not even Saint Blaise. You sit on a log, warming your hands by the fire, and think back to last year's feast before the spring campaign. Roast lamb, spiced wine, berries soaked in honey. A rare day. A lucky one. This is simpler, more real. A skewer of probably pheasant. A half pie. A few sticky dates. And somewhere in your pouch, a crust of bread older than your squire's shaving habits. Still, it fills you. A night's dinner isn't about indulgence. It's about readiness. Calories, warmth, the illusion of normalcy. You chew thoughtfully, and eye the other men's plates. One is eating a mash of peas and barley. Another has managed to scrape together a meat pudding of some kind. It wobbles ominously. The last time you had pudding on campaign, it exploded. You nod a silent greeting to a knight across the fire, who's chewing slowly with eyes closed. You recognize that look. He's imagining better meals, richer ones, hot, pastries, river trout with rosemary, sweet wine. You'd join him in that reverie. But your tongue is currently glued to the roof of your mouth by a particularly adhesive date. You wash it down with a swig of ale. It's stronger than the morning batch, probably a mistake. But it burns the back of your throat in a comforting way, like swallowing a sunset. The fire pops. Sparks rise. Your stomach gurgles softly, hopefully in satisfaction. You lean back on the log, rub your eyes, and think, not bad. Could have been worse. Could have been cabbage stew again. And with that, stretch, crack your neck, and think ahead to the last meal of the night. The quiet, secret one. The one shared only among knights who know the truth of battle and digestion. That sometimes the most important food of the day is the one you eat in the dark. Long after the fires have died, with nothing but bread in one hand and your thoughts in the other. But for now, the evening belongs to this pie, this meat, this flame. You take another bite. Still no idea what animal it came from. Still better than lentils. The fire crackles lower now, snapping in short bursts like a tired drummer, too proud to stop playing. The smoke has thinned into lazy ribbons drifting across the tents, and the camp's noise has dwindled to murmurs, coughs, and the faint clinking of armor being peeled off like medieval Tupperware. You sit back on your log, one hand cradling your cup of ale, the other resting on your thigh where your sword lies sheathed and still. The stars are peeking out overhead, sharp and cold and indifferent to your stomach. And that stomach, still doing ... things, you shift a little. Debating the risks of fermented barley and mystery pie being roommates in your gut, it could go either way. But there's no denying it too need to drink. Not to get drunk. Not even to forget. Just to hydrate. Because here's the unromantic truth about being a knight. You cannot drink the water. You tried once. Once it ended with you curled behind a hay bale, whispering prayers to 5 different saints, while your intestines made escape attempts. So, now, you sip ale. Not the rich, frothy stuff poured in goblets at feasts, but small ale barely alcoholic, thin brewed weak on purpose. It's safer than water, and easier to keep down than wine. Everyone drinks it, infants, monks, knights with sensitive stomachs and regret in their eyes. You raise your mug and take a thoughtful swallow. It's lukewarm, slightly sour, and vaguely bready, like someone fermented a biscuit and lost interest halfway through. But it won't kill you. And that's honestly enough. A knight beside you offers a wineskin. You shake your head politely. Not tonight. You remember that one time 2 campaigns ago, you accepted a drink from Sir Malric, whose wine had been stored in a flask previously used for lamp oil. You didn't taste grapes, you tasted fire. Still, you nod in gratitude and watch as he tips the skin back, wiping his mouth with a gloved thumb. Better than river sludge, he mutters. True. The rivers, streams, and wells near most battlefields are a gamble. Maybe the water's clean. Maybe there's a cow upstream doing unspeakable things. Historians still argue whether medieval water sources were safer than we've been told, or just filtered through very strong stomachs. Either way, knights didn't take chances. In rare cases, if you were lucky or rich, you might be given wine. Real wine, diluted, yes, but still flavored with grape and occasional ambition. Lords traveled with barrels of it, rolled carefully behind their tents. You once had a cup of spiced wine on Christmas Eve, heated gently with cinnamon and clove. It was the closest you've come to crying from joy, or maybe you were just cold, or hungry, or both. You shake off the memory and return to the present. Your squire appears at your side with a wooden jug. "Refill?" asks. You nod. He pours more ale, careful not to spill. His hands are steadier than they used to be. He's growing into his roles, lowly, awkwardly, with the grace of a calf on cobblestones. You hope he never has to eat as many mystery pies as you have. You sip again and lean back, listening. Around the fire, stories begin, as they always do when the bellies are half full and the shadows long. Tales of past battles, exaggerated wins, near-death escapes. Someone swears they once took down 2 men with a ladle. Another claims he cooked an entire pheasant inside a pumpkin. I laugh. It's not because it's funny, but because it might actually be true. The fire flares as someone throws on a fresh log. Sparks shoot skyward, spinning briefly like fireflies. Before dying in the dark, a few men begin playing dice, betting strips of dried meat and last pick of tomorrow's meal. You consider joining, but your stomach is still sending gentle warnings. A burble here, a shift there. You decide to stay seated. Your squire returns again, this time with a small parcel wrapped in cloth, found it in the supply chest. He whispers like he's delivering treasure. You unwrap it. A fig, dried, wrinkled, but unmistakably sweet-smelling. You take a cautious bite. It's chewy, rich, and tastes like the end of a good day. Figs were rare on campaign, either imported or dried months earlier. This one must have been hoarded by someone with discipline or an irrational fear of scurvy. You glance at your squire, who's now eyeing the fig like a dog watching a roast. You break it in half and hand him the larger piece. He lights up. You both chew in silence, watching the fire die down. Not far away, a man coughs violently, doubled over. Someone else swears softly, probably stepped on a loose tent peg. But otherwise the camp is quiet. It's the wind, the wood, the crackle. Your gut slowly coming to terms with the choices you've made. A few men break off from the fire and head toward the tents, muttering good nights and making jokes about snoring louder than swords. You sit a little longer, sipping. The last of your ale. It's thinner now, almost watery, like it's given up. You know the feeling. You rise slowly, joints clicking, and begin to walk back to your tent. You pass a man vomiting behind a cart. You don't ask you. Don't stop. You've been there. He probably drank the wine, or worse, the water. Your tent welcomes you with the enthusiastic warmth of a damp rag. The canvas flaps wheeze in the wind. The floor is uneven, and the air inside smells faintly of wool, iron, and men who haven't bathed in 3 weeks. Which is to say, dash home. Your squire scurries in behind you, helping unstrap the last of your armor. The metal clinks as it's laid carefully to the side breastplate. Pauldrons grieves. Piece by piece, you shed the weight of your station until you're left in a tunic, padded at the elbows and knees. Thin enough to feel the cold creeping up from the ground like a judgmental fog. You sigh and stretch your arms overhead, groaning. Softly, your stomach gives one final rumble, like a bored bear. Not quite empty, not quite full, just ... aware. Then comes the knock-hiff. You can call the scratchy sound on a tent flap a knock. It's the quartermaster's assistant, pale and breathless, clutching a small sack. "Pre-battle meal prep, sir," he says, trying not to sound bored. "Captain's orders?" You take the sack, open it, and raise an eyebrow. It contains a boiled egg, a chunk of bread, and miraculously a strip of roast meat wrapped in cloth. Beef, no mistaking it. Cold but unmistakably beef. You blink,
All the good stuff.
as usually. Saved for the post-battle feast, or at least the officer's table. Either someone made a mistake, or you've been promoted without knowing it. You don't question it. You just sit down and start eating. The egg is overboiled, chalky, and cracked, but the yolk is real. Warmth blooms in your belly after the first bite. The bread is coarse but passable. The beef, well, it's tough and stringy. To your mouth, it tastes like victory. This is the meal that matters. Pre-battle food is a thing of ritual, not indulgence. Not even nourishment, really. It's about readiness, focus, enough energy to survive the next day, but not so much your stomach rebels mid-charge. That's a thing, by the way. Battle-induced bowel betrayal. Historians still argue whether knights actually feared the runs as much as arrows. But anyone who's ever worn a full suit of armor while digesting cabbage knows the answer is absolutely. Your squire settles into the corner, gnawing on his own portion dried apple, a slice of cold mutton, and something that might be a barley biscuit. He's content. He doesn't know yet that digestion is the real enemy. You watch him. For a moment, he's young. Probably thinks this is the start of something glorious. In truth, you've learned to treasure these quiet meals more than the clashes. It's here before the march, before the drums, before the screaming that your mind finds strange clarity, and your stomach miraculously finds peace. You take small bites. Chew slowly. Listen to the tent canvas flapping. Smell the beef's smoke-trapped fibers. Taste the faint tang of salt on the bread. One of your tent neighbors coughs out a laugh. Then a voice low and dry. Hope they feed us better after we win. Another, hope they feed us at all. Everyone chuckles. You wonder what the others are eating? You know the captain dines in his private space, probably roast duck, spiced wine, a side of smugness. The higher lords. Maybe fruit if the supply wagon's held. Imported things, dates, figs, even almonds sometimes make an appearance at the noble tables. But for the rest of you, this is it. You tear off another piece of bread. Mop up the juice from the beef and imagine for a brief moment that you're sitting in a quiet manner, not a battlefield's doorstep. Maybe by a fire, maybe with a dog sleeping nearby, maybe with a cup of cider and nothing left to fight for. But that's not tonight. Tonight. You eat with one ear tuned to the wind and the distant murmur of sentries, your eyes darting to the edge of the tent. Every time the fire outside flares too brightly, your squire finishes first, licking his fingers and yawning. Should I prep the gear for morning, sir? You nod. He starts organizing with quiet, practiced movements, polishing where he can, tightening straps, laying out the underpadding so it doesn't chafe well, not as much. You finish your last bite and hand him the now empty cloth. You lean back and breathe out slowly. There's something about this moment sitting in near darkness, stomach just barely satisfied, mind humming with nerves that makes you feel oddly alive. No one sings, no one toasts. It's too soon for that. But you can tell everyone is thinking the same thing. What if this is the last meal? It's a shared silence, not mournful, just accepted. You shift on the canvas mat, wrapping your cloak tighter around your shoulders. Your stomach feels solid now, grounded. The food sitting like a warm stone deep inside. And yet, there's one rule you never forget. You do not overeat before battle. There's no room for indulgence, not in your stomach, not in your armor, not. In the space between strategy and survival, you skip the cheese, you skip the onions, you definitely skip the fermented cabbage. Nothing that bubbles, bloats, or breaks you from the inside out. You once watched a knight faint mid-battle from stomach cramps. Another soiled his leggings before the first charge. And Sir Darnell, poor man, had to remove his helm mid-fight to vomit. He didn't survive the second swing. You finish the ale slowly, each swallow deliberate. By now the camp is truly quiet, only the wind and the distant creak of the watchtower ladder. The torches outside your tent flutter like nervous birds. You slide onto your side, cloak bundled beneath your head. Place one hand over your belly. It doesn't hurt. That's a win. And with that, your eyes begin to close, your breath evens. And the pre-battle meal finishes its journey downward into you, a silent promise that at least for tonight, your body is fueled. Whether it's ready, well, you'll find out tomorrow. You wake in darkness. Not the comforting kind of darkness that means a few more hours of sleep. No, this is the early morning sort that whispers, "Get up, get moving." Time to find out if you're still alive by sunset. Outside, you hear the distant murmur of voices, armor scraping against armor, horses snorting as they're saddled. Someone drops a helmet, swears, and is immediately hushed. You stretch slowly, cautiously, your limbs ache, your back complains, but your stomach feels okay, not empty, not heavy, balanced like a tightrope walker who knows the wind's about to pick up. You sit up, roll your shoulders, and reach for the last piece of food tucked into your travel sack. A crust of bread, wrapped in linen and rubbed with garlic and a hint of tallow. You consider it. Then, with a sigh, set it down. Not today, because if there's one unbreakable rule among seasoned knights, it's this. There are certain things you simply don't eat before battle, like cheese. Gods help you, especially cheese. It doesn't matter how tempting it is. No matter how aged, how sharp, how perfectly crumbly cheese is a gamble. One unlucky slice, and you're sweating inside your helm, clutching your stomach while trying to parry a spear. No duel is improved by unexpected flatulence. Trust you, you've seen it happen, Sir Lionel. May he rest in deeply embarrassing peace. Ate an entire wheel of soft goat cheese before a skirmish once. He passed out from heat stroke. Halfway through a charge, not because of a wound, but because the gas built up faster than his armor could vent. He hit the ground like a dropped coin purse. Then there's cabbage. Oh, the cursed cabbage. Bold, pickled, stewed, or rots a traitor. It lies to your face with its soft green innocence and then stabs you from within, just as you're lining up for formation. No man should ever risk a cabbage burp inside a closed helmet. Even legumzo's humble. Lentils and peas that fed you yesterday are best avoided today. Too much fiber, too little forgiveness. They swell, they churn. They do not respect the sanctity of a silent march. Historians still argue whether dietary discipline was enforced in knightly orders, or if it was just hard-won wisdom passed down. From veteran to greenhorn in whispers over stew, you believe it was both? Food is strategy, after all. And strategy includes not needing a bathroom in the middle of a cavalry charge. Your squire arrives with a mug of small ale and a hunk of oatcake. Safe food, reliable food. It's food that neither betrays nor surprises. You take it gratefully and chew, slowly as the world outside the tent grows brighter. "Anything else, sir?" he asks. You shake your head. You've done this before. You know how the next few hours will go? The quiet, the gearing up, the final checks. And eventually that sharp, surreal moment where everything stands still, where your heart races but your limbs are calm, where you wonder between breaths whether that last bite was too much. You glance around your tent. The cheese is still sitting there, looking smug. You toss your cloak over it. There's always someone who thinks they're invincible. There's always one knight who indulges a little too, much convinced that courage can outpace indigestion. It never ends well. Once, during a siege, a knight downed 2 bowls of stewed beans, a heel of buttered rye, and half a roasted onion. You know this because he boasted about it. An hour later, he charged the enemy gates, made it 5 steps, stopped. Cold and vomited so hard he lost his footing. The opposing side didn't even bother finishing him off. They just stepped around him. You finish your oatcake, brush the crumbs from your lap, and begin the ritual of arming up. The gambeson, first still damp, of course. Then the hauberk, clinking as it settles over your shoulders. The breastplate, the greaves, the spalders. Each piece strapped tight, each buckle checked twice. You feel heavier, but not sluggish. Just enough food to anchor you, not weigh you down. You stand, adjusting the cinch on your belt, and take one final swig of ale. The sun is rising now, painting the sky with iron-colored light. You step out of the tent, all around you. Knights are doing the same, some quietly praying, others pacing. A few performing last-minute stretches like dancers before a brutal ballet. The horses are lined up. Banners unfurl in the wind. Someone mutters about helmet padding. Someone else is arguing over whose turn it was to sharpen the pikes. You glance down the line and spot a familiar figure doubled over behind a tent. Ah, the cheese got him. You nod solemnly and offer a silent prayer not for his survival, but for his dignity. Your squire approaches, offering your helmet. You take it, fit it over your head, test the strap. Snug, safe. Just enough airflow to breathe, not enough to tempt cabbage ghosts. The captain calls out. Formations begin. Your name is shouted. You join your unit, shield ready, sword sheathed, for now. The lines move like water flowing into place. You glance at the man beside you. Eat much, you ask, voice muffled. He snorts. Just oatcake and dried apple. Smart. Learned from last time. Never trust stew on a cloudy day. You nod. The horns sound. The march begins. Your armor creaks. Your breath puffs out in bursts. Your stomach. Silent. Steady. You did it right. And as the horizon tilts and the ground begins to shake beneath the thunder of hooves, offer one last whispered thanks to your discipline, your oatcake, and your decision to throw that cheese into the bushes. The battle ends the way it always does. Not with trumpets and glory, but with blood in your mouth and mud in your boots. You're standing. You're breathing. You can't hear much yet, not over the ringing in your ears and the rattle of your heart trying to decide if it's done. Your armor is smeared with grime and worse. Your arm aches from swinging. Your legs ache from standing. And your stomach, strangely quiet. No rebellion. No surprises. Just an emptiness that feels like a question you're still too tired to answer around you. The battlefield hums with aftershock groans, prayers, the rustle of wind dragging torn banners across the ground. You limp toward camp, your sword dragging. At your side, too heavy to lift, too familiar to drop. When you arrive, they hand you a cup first ale again. Stronger than before, braver than before. You take a slow sip, then another, and only then do you ask the question that everyone else is too tired to raise. What's for supper? Because victory has a taste, and in most cases, it tastes like overcooked mutton. You're directed toward a long fire pit, where smoke curls lazily and meat hangs on spits like weary champions. The cook is red-faced and cursing, barking orders at a boy wielding a dripping ladle like a sword. The pot he stirs is enormous, filled with what smells like barley, root vegetables, and something that may or may not have been hunted legally. You ease down onto a stool that doesn't collapse, which feels like a small miracle. Your squire appears with a wooden bowl. He doesn't say anything. He just hands it over. Inside, mutton stew, thick, unapologetic, a little scorched at the edges, but with a greasy sheen that catches the firelight like gold. You dip your spoon and taste. It's too salty, too oily, too perfect. The meat is chewy. The carrots are overdone. The broth could double as leather polish. You'd kill for seconds. Across the camp, men are sprawled on cloaks and collapsed tents, eating in silence or talking in bursts laughter that feels forced but welcome. Someone sings a song with no tune. Someone else tells a joke that makes no sense. Everyone laughs anyway. You look down at your bowl. It's nearly empty already. You forgot how hungry you were. A second bowl appears, carried by the same boy with the same ladle. You nod and accept.
The stew tastes better this time.
Way where maybe your standards are collapsing in victory's warm glow?
Either way, you're not complaining. Alongside your bowl, someone passes a hunk of bread, fresh baked, still steaming. You tear off a piece and dunk it in the stew. It dissolves, slightly spongy and glorious, the kind of bread you remember from childhood or possibly just dreamed about enough times that memory and wish have fused. The squire brings over something else. A baked apple, still wrapped in a bit of linen. It's soft, cored, and filled with a single walnut and a drizzle of honey. You blink at it. Where did you? Cook owed me a favor. He grins. You take the apple warm, sweet, just a little burnt on the bottom. The honey sticks to your fingers, and you don't care. You chew slowly, then slower still, like if you make it last long enough, the aches in your body might catch up and pass you by. Like if you savor it long enough, the battle will seem further away, and it does. By bit, bite by bite, historians still argue whether knights celebrated battle wins with feasts as often as the stories claim. Some say yes, victory meant mead, music. Others say food was rationed too tightly for true indulgence. But in your experience, there's always something. A stew, a song, stolen baked apple, the fire pops. Sparks scatter into the sky. You lean back against your saddlebag, exhale slowly, and let the food do its quiet. Heavy magic. You notice, not far off, a group of knights, trying to roast a boar on a spit that's clearly too short. One end keeps dipping into the fire, they argue, they laugh. The boar smolders. You smile, you might even try a bite later. They don't incinerate it first. For now, you rest. Tomorrow brings cleanup, repairs, possibly another march. Definitely. More lentils. But tonight? Tonight, you're full. You survived. And everything, even the stew, tastes like peace. Asterisk, the fire dims as the night deepens. And around you, the camp finally stills. The clang of pots gives way to the soft hush of sleep, of boots being unlaced. Men collapsing onto cloaks with murmured thanks that they get to see the stars again. Your stomach, once a battlefield of its own, now lies calm content. The stew sits heavy but kind. The bread hums like a lullaby in your chest. Even the honey on your fingers has dried into a sticky memory of sweetness. You lie back, pulling your cloak over your shoulders, and watch the smoke drift skyward. It twists slowly, gently, like a ribbon made of whispers, curling into the dark. A horse snorts in the distance. Someone coughs. Spoon clinks once, then silence again. Your limbs ache, but it's the ache of survival. The ache that says you were here, you stayed steady, that you knew what to eat, what to skip, and how to hold a spoon with dignity even when the broth fought back. So now, just breathe. Let your breath slow. Let the weight of the day sink into the earth beneath you, and let the warm stew cradle your insides like a blanket you swallowed on purpose. There's nothing left to do now. No fighting, no chewing, just sleep, and maybe, if you're lucky, you'll dream of warm bread, and not, God forbid, of cabbage.